Welcome, Carl.
Thank you, Ben. It's good to be here.
Great to
Happy
have you.
4th of July.
Yes, I made it through with 10 fingers, 10 toes. How about you?
Likewise.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, it's kind of the dead zone for fantasy football, right? We've got a few weeks before training camp start. There's not a lot to talk about if you're just wanting to talk about regular fantasy football, but we've got something much cooler to talk about, our own fantasy. Um, of course, we had our fantasy draft in May, and since then, I've just been typing and nonstop conjecture about everybody's rosters. And
You wrote half a book.
Basically,
Quite lengthy. It's almost
I lead a
impressive.
very
I didn't know he
exciting
could write.
Yeah. So I shared with Carl and a few other people the 28 pages of roster grades, and figure, you know what? We've got some time to rip through these, and we should make some content. So,
Absolutely.
we'll try and run the clock out before training camp start with roster grades.
And making fun of Ryan.
And making fun of Ryan. Because what better place to start than making fun of Ryan, who is the reigning champ?
No, we're not doing that anymore. No such thing. Fresh start. Everything is new. This is the first year of this league.
You're not wrong. I mean,
that's what I'm going with, because it pains me that you have 2 and Ryan has 1, and I'm just going to pretend none of that ever happened, because now we have 12 teams.
I mean, let's just say that winning a 10-team league is different than winning a 12-team league. I mean,
it's not important.
Right. Okay. He's really digging into that. Never happened. So I admire that. Good for you.
Yeah, that's what's happening here. All right.
Let's
lead us off, man. What do you have to say about Ryan?
The too long don't read version of Ryan's team is Ryan's going to have a good team in a year or two. At least that's kind of what I came away from when I looked everything over. He's got a lot of high upside guys, a ton of rookies, and first year guys that maybe don't necessarily have a stranglehold on a starting job, or are maybe walking into a picture that is a little bit unclear. And so there's talent, but does that talent equal points this year? I don't know.
It's a fair concern. Looking at his team, there's a number of places where, or for the most part, I like the starting roster. It's just the depth is definitely a concern for exactly like you said. It's a youth movement. There's a ton of rookies. Who knows what, if anything, they're going to actually do on the field this year.
Right. So when I went through and I reviewed everything, I kind of broke it into chunks like we did in the draft. So on my screen, I don't know if you could see it. I've got it pulled up here. We've got the first 6 rounds. So we went Amon-Ra St. Brown, Malik Neighbors, Ken Walker, Devon Achane, Jalen Waddle, and Dalton Kincaid. All said and done, I think those first 6 picks are really good. There's a lot of talent there. A couple of things where I had to kind of raise a concern flag right off the bat would be Neighbors. He's a guy that has all the talent in the world, but he's got Daniel Jones as his quarterback for now. So that is.
And is there anyone else on that roster? Are there other wide receivers, other running backs, tight ends, literally anything else on that offense?
No, that's just it. So he's going to be the focal point, which cuts both ways, right? I mean, he'll get a shit ton of target, but he's also going to get blanketed by every team's number 1 corner and schemed against, right? So you're really going to have to show your worth year one as a rookie wide receiver on what looks like a brutal offense.
Right. But you know what? You give me Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jalen Waddle as the starting wide receivers. I really like the look of that.
Yeah, definitely. For sure.
We're not, I mean, draft position notwithstanding, we're not necessarily actually asking Neighbors to be one of his top 2 receivers this year. Like him to, work his way pretty quickly into a flex type position. But Amon-Ra and Waddle will have those 2 wide receiver spots locked down as long as they stay on the field, which, of course, with Waddle potentially is a bit of a question, but he's generally been pretty good.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point. My other quibble then would be the running backs. Walker and Achane. Again, 2 guys that are very talented, are explosive big play guys. They're both seemingly in timeshares, at the very least.
Right.
Walker has a brand new coaching staff, and they've got another running back that was drafted in the 2nd or 3rd round last, Charbonnet. So who knows where he stands with a brand new coaching staff? He could be the number 2 guy right out of the bag. We don't know. Right.
Well, and then Achane, however the fuck you pronounce his name. It just, the other question we have to ask with him right now, beyond how much of a share of the carries he gets, is can he stay healthy? Last year he blew up for like 3 weeks and then he died.
Yeah, a couple times, right?
That's a big question. Like, okay, you're in your 2nd year. You've played 5 games, something like that. Can you stay healthy? If you can stay healthy, ton of talent, but it's got to be on the field.
Right. So, I mean, look, if we're looking at just talent, I gave the first 6 rounds an A grade because I think there is a shit ton of talent there, a lot of upside, but with that upside, I think come a pretty fair amount of question marks as to how many points that can generate this year, at least. So,
right. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but Kincaid came in at the end in the 6th round, right?
Yeah. Yep. That was his last or his 6th round pick. Yep. So,
want to touch on him real quick because that's the only tight end he drafted. And while you broke it down by rounds, I kind of broke it down by position a little bit when I was going through it. And so I want to touch on the tight end quick while I got a chance. I got to say, I do like that pick a lot. I like Kincaid. He had a pretty good year last year. He's about the only guy coming back for Josh Allen that catches the football. I mean, it's him, Cook, and just a pile of new guys. And there's plenty of talent in the new guys, but they're new. And we all know how quarterbacks feel about guys they know. Feel like Kincaid could be a really good get for him this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100% with what you said. I think that's a slam dunk pick right there. I wouldn't be shocked if Kincaid had the 2nd most targets, if not maybe the most targets, as a receiver there, because
in Buffalo,
he's basically a slot at this point. He's not a tight end. He's a giant slot receiver. Right. So, yeah, absolutely. Good point. All right. Let's take a look at the next chunk of players here. Right off the bat, the main headline is the trade with Big Mike. So, to me, I think just looking at your roster grades, that's a huge negative because that ended up being what could have been any number of premium players taken right there for 30 fab bucks that who knows what that's going to turn into, I mean, yeah, it'll come in clutch later in the year, but that's a lot of points you're missing out on, right? Like that's a player on your roster that just turned into additional fab bucks.
Pretty clearly, immediately after that trade, Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons went back to back.
Mm-hmm.
Like, would be nice to have one of those guys on the roster. One of the top top 5, top 6 defensive linemen at a position that is often somewhat scarce.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
Outside of
most
that,
them.
after that, I mean, Bolton and Bernard, that's a hell of a duo for your starting linebacking core. I've got zero quibbles with that. I think both of those guys easily end up top 10 at the position. You know, if not even better, especially with Bolton, you know.
Yeah. My one concern with Bernard is, what happens with Milano coming back? How does that impact him?
I'm wondering the same.
And it's not like it's going to push him off the field or anything like that, but it probably he's got to share a little bit, and he didn't
Right.
last year.
Yeah, that snap share might take a beating because Milano makes a lot of money in that defense. I mean,
right. And honestly, even if Bernard doesn't give up many snaps, Milano's going to take some tackles.
Yeah. Yep.
You're going to be sharing even if Bernard doesn't get pushed off the field, he's going to be sharing the field with Milano, which is just by default going to take away some of what he would have done otherwise.
Yes.
Excellent.
But
it's hard to say how much that'll actually impact him as far as numbers go. It might just push him to the 11th best linebacker instead of the 8th. Might be what this difference is, and let's be honest, that's not going to move the needle much. So
right.
it's picking a nit, but it's a question.
Yeah. Nope. That's a great point. Rounding out, we've got Xavier McKinney, we've got Montez Sweat, and Tony Pollard. Guys that have some name value, but when we dig a little bit deeper, maybe not as sexy as we initially thought. For me, McKinney last year was, for all intents and purposes, a linebacker in the Giants defense. This year, he's on the Packers, and I think that changes things considerably for his use case, because the Packers, unlike the Giants, have a shit ton of linebackers, and they're all pretty talented. So I don't see him playing really far up in the box and racking up tackles like he did last year. I think he had over 100 tackles last year with the Giants. I don't see that playing out as well this year in a new defense.
Right. He's going to have to actually play safety this year.
Right.
Which still isn't necessarily too bad. I still think he can have a lot of success there. It's just probably not going to be quite what he did last year.
Right. Yeah.
I do like the Sweat pick. He looked real good with the Bears last year, and I don't really see any real reason that can't continue.
No, Sweat, I think, is a really good value at that point.
Yeah.
I think early in the year last year, I think he led the league in sacks for most of the year. I think up until that trade, I think the trade a little bit out of a little of the wind out of his sails when he ended up going to Chicago. But
I thought when he went to Chicago is when he took off and started doing something.
You could be right. I know those first 6 or 7 weeks, though, when he was still with the Washington football team, he was doing really, really well.
Oh, yeah. I just pulled up. He was there it was between week 8 and 9. He was kind of kicking ass in Washington. And, yeah, he definitely dropped off a little bit after he got to Chicago. But he did still do pretty well.
But, yeah, I think Chicago added
the move.
Yeah, I think they added a little help on the line in the draft. So I could see him, still having some success. I think, if anything, they improved the situation on offense. So they might be playing with a lead. He could have more opportunities to rush the quarterback. and he might have a little bit of help around him to take some of the heat off him, because I think he was the only guy on that defensive line, really.
As far as I'm aware, yeah.
Right. So
who the hell knows who's in Chicago at this point?
yeah, exactly. And then Pollard, I had a lot of high hopes for in Dallas last year when he kind of had a chance to be the lone man.
And he did nothing
yeah.
with it.
Yeah, it never materialized. So,
yeah, I'm not expecting much out of him in Tennessee. I feel like he's pretty much just a guy at this point. And maybe he'll prove me wrong, but I don't feel real good about that one.
Well, the biggest concern is like he's literally like in a 50-50 timeshare right now. Like everything they've talked about is how Pollard and Spears are interchangeable. Like they see them as the same guy in this offense. So
okay,
it could really be, every other drive they're alternating running backs, and at that point, I don't know. You're hoping that one guy has a good, and they lean on one guy halfway through the game versus the other. So
right, yeah, it becomes that hot hand idea, and that's fine for a football team and awful for a fantasy team.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, field portion, I was a little bit more negative. I looked at a C- overall. I think giving up that round 7 pick hurt the overall talent available. The other guys, like I said, players that I like, but question marks again, maybe even more so than those first 6 round guys. So that's where I ended up here.
Yeah. I hear you. What you got next?
Right. We got a big old chunk in the last the last 14 rounds. I don't know how many we went here.
I think it was 12, but yeah,
12, 14.
Yep.
We can't quite fit them all on the screen. I'll try and just nail it. There we go. Okay.
There you go. Smaller.
So this one, I tried to look at it as the offensive guys versus the defensive guys, just to kind of make it a little bit easier to break it down. It was a good rebound, though. I feel like much stronger in the final rounds. Instead of looking at a lot of upside, I think we went a little safer with a lot of these picks, which benefited him. He did manage to get the starting quarterback at the very end, and I think he actually did pretty good with those quarterbacks. He came away with Goff and Cousins.
I think the Goff Cousins stack is, not excited about it. I don't think you have a real chance to finish as the number 1 quarterback there, but I think you got a real good chance to finish with 2 of the top 10.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And that's,
pretty fucking good. Like that's a good move at quarterback. I can't hate that one. I'd like to.
Right.
Not particularly fond of either of those guys, but
no.
it's just not all that impressed with them, but damn it, they're solid fantasy quarterbacks. They have been for years.
Yeah. You're not really going to have to sweat too many matchups. I don't think it's going to be a lot of chattering teeth going, oh, God, do I go with Goff or Cousins? I think between the two, you're looking at a safe matchup every week. So,
right. Well, and you're pretty much locked in with Goff through the first month at least until you're confident that Cousins has hit the ground running in Atlanta. And for a couple of weeks, if he hasn't, you just dump him. Like that's not a big loss. I think Ryan did really good at how he grabbed the quarterbacks.
Yeah. The rest of these offensive guys, I think they play out pretty well with the way he drafted in the early rounds. You got Keon Coleman, so you're double dipping in that balance, which isn't a bad idea. They're going to have a pretty good offense with Josh Allen throwing the ball.
Right. You got another talented rookie.
Yep.
But you do again have the question of how much are we doing this year? Because talented wide receivers, you never know for sure what you're getting out of them year 1.
Right. A lot to be determined with that 49er situation, right? Like there's all the hype in the world around Pearsall, but if nothing changes with Debo and
Ayuk.
Ayuk. There you go.
I mean,
Yourself
right now
not getting-
he's at absolute best. Right now he's the fifth target in that offense.
right.
Under the best possible circumstances, he's behind Debo, Ayuk, Kittle, and CMC. Not necessarily in that order. So I think he's very much feels like a next year kind of play, unless they do actually move one of those wide receivers during training camp.
Yeah, and the steam has kind of died around that. There was a lot of hype for that early on. I really haven't heard anything at all. Lately.
I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that makes sense. I feel like they're in a situation where they feel like they've got a window right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think the smart move for the Niners is to play it out.
Yeah, definitely.
And,
I mean, the closer we get to camp, the harder it's going to be, right? Like there's
right. Well, what are you going to get for him right now?
Yeah.
Like, we're through the draft, so you're looking at next year's picks or players, and let's be honest, we know player for player trades just aren't that big of a thing in the NFL.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I think Pearsall is a next year kind of move. Yeah, I like it as a next year kind of move. I just don't think it's worth a lot this year. So it's a good thing it's a pseudo dynasty league for him.
That's kind of how I've been looking at this because there's so much of this value tied up into future years that it's gonna have to treat it that way. So,
right. I do like having Charbonnet as the handcuff to Walker. If one of them comes out, kind of runs with the job, he's got that guy. The one potential risk there is that it turns into a true 50-50 split and neither of them are worth a damn.
Right.
But I think it's more likely that one of them kind of takes the 1A kind of role. So I don't know for sure which one it'll be, but he's got them both. So he's sitting pretty good as far as Seahawks backs go.
Yeah, 100%. The defensive side, again, looks pretty good, honestly. Brian Branch should continue to flourish in Detroit. I think he's got his locked up.
I was a little upset Ryan stole him from me. I wanted Brian Branch again. He did really well for me last year before he got hurt.
Right. I mean, and when you think of it, I mean, it's not hard to envision Brian Branch as a junior version of your guy in Tampa Bay.
Winfield?
Yeah.
Yep.
You know.
Yep. Got a handful of those guys running around the league right now that are very much they get listed as something, but they're very much just a defensive back who can kind of do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Jermaine Johnson, I think, could be another really good bargain playing for the Jets, especially now with Rashad into Japan. So that's
what? You just shrug out for a second there. What the hell are you talking about?
There are other D linemen that they traded for from the Eagles, and now he's in Japan, just hanging out, not showing up for the Jets.
Okay, I guess I missed that one.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Good for him.
Pretty much. So that looks like a really good pick. Like I said, I think. What's that?
I was just going to say I like the look of his starting defense. I'm a big defensive guy in this league, so like I don't love the fact that there's almost a complete lack of depth. Like he's got one defensive player on the bench, but I do like the look of the starters. I don't think there's definitely better starting defenses in the league, but I don't think that's going to really hold him back.
Right.
No.
Agreed. I gave this last round of picks a B+. I think he got a lot of upside again with some of these rookies. He did a good job handcuffing that backfield in Seattle, which, probably wasn't a bad idea.
Right. I think that was a good move.
Right. His quarterbacks are super safe. We talked about and he rounded out the defensive starters. He got Josie Jewell, another really good late grab there, who's going to be the starter in Carolina. So, yeah, this rounded things out really well for him.
Yeah, it's a solid looking team. It's definitely got some questions on it, but all in all, it's fun. The beautiful thing that I noticed after you sent your things and I sent your thoughts and I started looking at the teams a little bit is there's no there's not one team that's stands out significantly better or worse than the rest of the league this year, which I kind of like. I think it's going to be a really good year.
No, I really do think, especially when we look, kind of in that middle cluster of teams, everyone's neck and neck. There's not a lot differentiating like 6 or 7 teams. It's going to be pretty razor thin, down to injuries and replacement players, things like that. So,
and Ben likes to harp on this, and I'm going to take the opportunity to throw some in on this too. Like, you got to make some fucking moves. Like that's going to be the big difference. I mean, a couple of injuries to the big guys is going to hurt some teams, but for the most part, it's which teams are playing the waivers and making smart choices and keeping it going, because we're all starting from pretty damn close to even this year.
Yeah. And we all know that Ryan has no problem making moves. Something he's done maybe
sometimes has problems making good moves, but he makes a lot of them.
Right.
Quantity over quality is Ryan's game.
Yes, that's right. That's right. I ranked Ryan. Well, let me start here. Okay, so ESPN ranked Ryan 8th, I believe. Let me double check my notes here. ESPN has Ryan 9th, and Fantasy Pros has Ryan 8th coming out of the draft. I think those are both pretty accurate. I took ESPN's lead. I'm sitting at 9th. Technically right outside of the playoffs, but I think he's right. He's got a lot of talent. And with all these rookies, I could see a handful of them solidify roles, midway through the season. And yeah, Ryan could absolutely be a spoiler in the back half of the year. I think he could really easily weasel his way into the playoffs, or at least blow up somebody else's playoff chances. So
right. Absolutely. Well, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of it.
Definitely. It looks good. It maybe looks better next year.
Yep. I agree with that.
Awesome. Well, there we have it. That's Ryan's team in a nutshell. And maybe we'll look at some more here a little later.
That sounds good. I like it. Thanks, man.